So normally I use Saturdays to release some sort of news video as it comes to tech. Today I wanted to take that time to conclude the Arc A380 trilogy as Intel, I guess it's kind of a news video, right? Intel released their new drivers for their Intel Arc lineup, which is supposed to basically increase FPS across the board, particularly in older render engine things like DirectX 9, DirectX 10, things like that. So on Wednesday, February 1st, Intel did release these drivers. They also had a permanent price cut for the Intel Arc A750 down to $250. So if you were thinking about getting that, it's probably a good time to do so. So a fix for bad frame rates is here. However, the big performance boost is going to come in those older render engines like DirectX 9. The big game that they pointed out in their blog post was, of course, Counter-Strike Go, being an older title that tons and tons of people still play today. Actually, over 1 million players a day. So while it is old, it is still a vastly popular game. I also want to take a look at Left 4 Dead 2, something that we don't really test here on the channel, but it is an older title as well. And I want to revisit Fortnite in this video too, to see if maybe we get any sort of performance increase in a DirectX 12 game. So first and foremost, let's talk about Counter-Strike, the big one. So in our original testing, without resizable bar turned on, we pulled frames per second, or FPS, of around 60 to 127 frames on low. This was before we turned resizable bar on, before we realized that, holy cow, the amount of performance increase by having rebar turned on is actually insane. Once we turned rebar on and tested again, we were getting between 90 and 289 FPS on low. Now with the new drivers, we started the game at 262 FPS on low, and depending on where you were in the map, we would be seeing FPS hitting up to 332 as a high. So already a vast improvement with just a driver. But I didn't want to just stop at low, so we bumped it up to medium as well. In there, we were seeing an average of around 240 frames per second, up to 300 plus depending on location in the map. So, wow, our first test without rebar turned on wouldn't even run medium at a playable frame rate, if I remember correctly. That's why I did low. So that's great, but what about running the game on high? Yes, I cranked the settings up to high, and to my surprise, we were still averaging over 200 frames per second. And on high, Counter-Strike Global Offensive was an absolute buttery smooth, playable masterpiece. Now, as mentioned before, when we tested this without rebar, the game wouldn't even run on medium. And now we have it running on high, on all settings set to high, at over 200 frames per second. Sometimes we did dip down to, 180, 170, 160. But for the most part, we were well above 200 most of the time. From Counter-Strike, I decided to test out Left 4 Dead 2, as this is another pretty popular old game running on an older rendering engine, and what I found was amazing. Now we don't test this, like I said in the beginning of the video, in our original test, but for this mission that I'm on here, I wanted to test this game out because it's an older title. And what I found was that in-game, I was getting away with an average of around 300 frames per second. Now, as I mentioned, I don't test this game normally, so I don't know what it would have run at before. All I know is that 300 frames per second, $130 graphics card, $140 graphics card. Okay, I'm okay with that. Now, this is high textures, high details with low shaders. 300 frames per second. Bananas. This is not a game that I'll be testing in GPU test videos in the future, but I had to download it and try it out for Arc because of these new drivers. I just wanted to know, I wanted to see if it was legit or if Intel was talking a bunch of bullshit. Now, Fortnite is the finale for this video to see if the drivers make any difference on newer titles. Now, I think Intel did claim that we'd be seeing up to a 10% boost in more modern games. So I wanted to run Fortnite to see. Now, in our first rebar test with Fortnite, we were running between 70 and 90 frames per second, averaging 87 and a max of 114. And what I determined from this new test is we did have a higher minimum frame rate, 65 over 62. Our max frames per second was about 10 FPS higher, and our average FPS was more or less the same as our rebar test at 87 frames per second. However, I think the brunt of the performance hikes in this driver are geared more towards those older render engines, so just keep that in mind. You might not be seeing the greatest performance increases in more modern titles. Overall, I am happy that the Intel Arc A380 trilogy is over, but I am also happy that Intel is willing to learn from any sort of mistakes that they may be making, and they're willing to act on it, and they're at least showing that they're trying to listen to the community. They're stepping up and trying to correct their mistakes, and that is something that I can respect. Now, more than ever, it is imperative to have competition in the GPU market, especially with Nvidia and AMD increasing their prices on their higher-end cards by so much that $250 on an A750 from Intel, with performance upgrades like this, seeing as the Arc A380 was doing at least relatively decent in more modern titles, it's only safe to assume that we can look at more performance boosts in the future. But for an A750, now might be a time to buy if it's something that you are going to think about doing anyway. This driver paired with that permanent price decrease down to $250 is a pretty appealing deal to me. If you were to ask me, that's appealing. That is very appealing. And the A750 is something that I'm going to look at picking up in the future because frankly, Intel is showing that they're at least willing to try to step up and fix their problems and mistakes. And like I said, that I can respect. And I'm hopeful for the future of the GPU market. I'm hopeful for the future of the GPU market. Are you using an Intel Arc GPU? Have you tried out the new drivers yet? What are your thoughts on it? The A380, like I said, in newer titles might not be performing the best when it comes to more newer games. This driver wasn't really geared for that, I don't feel. However, Counter-Strike at least saw a massive performance increase. And I'd be super curious to know if you're using an Intel Arc card or if you are going to consider picking one up now that we know that Intel is at least willing to play ball and try. Guys, that's the video. If you liked it, like it, subscribe to stay up to date on all my latest content, and I will see you in the next one. Take care.